I was dying, not slowly, not metaphorically, actually dying, alone in the dark in a penthouse I owned, while my husband boarded a flight to Europe. Before he left, he didn't say goodbye. He didn't leave food, or water, or a note. What he did leave was my medication in the trash can, and he smiled when he did it. This is the story of how I let him enjoy every single one of the 70 days, every Michelin-starred dinner, every Rolex, every Instagram post under the Eiffel Tower. I let them live like royalty on my money, while I built the cage they'd walk straight back into. When that front door opened on day 74, they weren't coming home to a fortune. They were walking into their worst nightmare. Let me take you back to where it started, Manhattan. Tribeca, a luxury penthouse that could have been featured in Architectural Digest. Floor-to-ceiling windows, wide plank oak floors, the kind of silence that costs $1 million a year to maintain. I was lying in the master bedroom, completely unable to move. The illness had consumed me from the inside out. What had once been a sharp, commanding woman who built an entire corporate empire from scratch was now a shadow, barely strong enough to tap a glass against the nightstand. My survival depended on one thing: a private experimental therapy, not covered by insurance, administered at precisely the same time every single day. Miss a dose and the diseased cells would win. Outside, a New York winter was tearing through the city. The heating was on, but I couldn't stop shaking. Every joint, every bone, every breath, it hurt. And from the living room? Laughter. My mother-in-law Clarice and sister-in-law Genevieve were gleefully discussing what outfits they'd wear for a stroll under the Eiffel Tower. I could hear luggage wheels rolling across my floors. My husband Thaddeus was packing his home office. With everything I had left, I tapped that glass against the nightstand. The bedroom door cracked open. Thaddeus walked in, wearing a tailored suit, smelling of expensive cologne, looking at me the way you look at an inconvenient piece of furniture you've been meaning to throw out. "Thaddeus," I whispered, "it's time for my medication. Please, just bring me the vials from the vanity and a glass of water." He crossed his arms, let out a sigh so thick with contempt it filled the entire room. "You are a constant nuisance," he said flatly. "We've spent a fortune on those pills and you're still just lying there. Get up and take them yourself later. The whole family is heading to the airport. Nobody has time to wait on you hand and foot." I stared at him, the man I had loved, the man I had protected, even from himself, for years. Then Clarice appeared in the doorway, Genevieve right behind her. My mother-in-law looked at her bedridden, shrinking daughter-in-law with an expression I will never forget for the rest of my life. Pure, undisguised disgust. "We are going on our European vacation," she announced, like she was reading off a grocery list. "Just because you're sick, are we supposed to cancel a trip we've been planning for months? You're staying home. Order delivery on your phone. Take your own pills. Thaddeus has worked hard all year. He deserves to rest and have fun." I couldn't breathe, and not just because of the illness. Here's what they never knew about me. What I had carefully hidden for years to protect the fragile ego of my husband. I wasn't who they thought I was. The penthouse they lived in, my money, the corporate trading firm Thaddeus ran as CEO, my capital, my vision, my sweat, every designer bag, every vacation, every scrap of comfort they had ever enjoyed, built by my hands and funded by my trust fund. A secret trust fund belonging to the hidden heir of one of the most powerful real estate and commercial conglomerates in the United States. My parents, Sterling and Vivian, were billionaires. Old money, real power, and I had chosen to walk away from all of it for love. To protect what I believed was something pure and genuine. I hid my identity completely, stepped into the shadows, handed Thaddeus the title of CEO so he could feel like a man in front of his family and friends. And this moment, right here, was my reward for that sacrifice. Genevieve, the sister-in-law, who had spent years kissing up to me to fund her shopping sprees, now joined her mother with a sneer. "Serafina, just rest. We're only going for about a month. Don't act so spoiled with Thaddeus. He's already exhausted. They walked back to the living room, laughing and chatting about Paris, and I lay there, staring at the ceiling, as tears soaked my pillow in total silence. At 11 p.m., the family headed for JFK. The pain was getting worse by the minute. Without that medication, my body was beginning to shut itself down. The abdominal cramping radiated up into my chest, stealing what little breath I had. I was drenched in sweat, while a blizzard raged outside the windows. I heard Thaddeus's footsteps one last time. I held on to one desperate, foolish hope, that somewhere deep inside the man I had married, a single human instinct, a husband's conscience, would flicker awake at the very last second. He walked to the vanity, he looked at the vials, and then, with complete and total calm, he swept every single one off the surface and dropped them into the trash. The hollow sound of plastic hitting the bin did something to me that I cannot describe. It cracked something open that I didn't even know could break. I screamed, tried to sit up. My body would not cooperate. He leaned over the bed, brought his face close to mine, and he whispered slowly, deliberately, like every word had been rehearsed. "Stop the theatrics, Serafina. The doctor said your illness is incurable. Every extra day you live is just prolonging your suffering. It would be better if you passed on quickly, to free yourself and this family. Don't worry. When you die, I'll take very good care of the company. My mother, Genevieve, they'll be fine. All of this will be mine now. You have nothing to do with it anymore." He straightened up, took my credit cards from the nightstand, grabbed my laptop and phone from the desk. Then he told me calmly that he had already flipped the breakers and shut off the main water valve. And before leaving, he had changed the passcode on the smart lock. "No one is coming to save you," he said. The door slammed. Every light in the penthouse went black, the heating system hummed and died, and I lay there in absolute darkness and absolute silence, listening to the deadbolt click into place from the outside as my husband's family left for their European vacation, fully expecting to return to a corpse. Here is the thing about people like Thaddeus. They think they know you completely. They believe they've mapped every resource, sealed every exit, accounted for every possibility. They never see the one thing they missed. Beneath the mattress, wedged into the far corner, was an old prepaid burner phone. I had bought it years ago when I first entered the corporate world, a paranoid habit born from hard experience. I had never once used it publicly. Thaddeus didn't know it existed. It took me 30 minutes to reach it. 30 minutes of inch-by-inch movement across the mattress in total darkness, every microscopic shift sending white-hot pain screaming through my body, sweat soaking the silk of my nightgown completely through. My fingers were numb from the cold. My vision kept going gray at the edges, but my fingers found it. The monochrome screen lit up faint and pale in the darkness. Battery indicator, full charge. I cried when I saw that glow. I actually sobbed onto the screen, tears splashing on the plastic case, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Then I steadied myself. And I dialed the number, carved permanently into the deepest part of my memory. The one I hadn't called in years, my father's personal cell phone, 3 rings. "Hello? Who is this?" "Dad," I rasped. "It's me. It's Serafina. Dad, I need you. Please." Silence. Then a crash, something glass shattering on a hard floor. My mother's voice exploding in the background, frantic, begging Sterling for the phone. When my father came back, his voice was cracked open in a way I had never heard before. But underneath the raw grief was something else. Something granite hard and completely decisive. "Serafina, where are you? Tell me everything." "Right now, we are here," I told him. Every detail, the medication in the trash, the breakers, the water valve, the locked door, the darkness, the cold. I told him I couldn't stand up. He didn't ask a single unnecessary question. "Do not hang up. Do not close your eyes. Mom and Dad are on their way right this second." I don't know how long I lay there after that call. Time had become meaningless. The cold was moving deeper into my bones. I kept losing and regaining consciousness, flickers of my childhood with my parents, alternating with the image of Thaddeus dropping those vials into the bin. Then, a massive crash from the living room, the shriek of a metal cutting through the door, the thunder of heavy combat boots on the hardwood. Tactical flashlights sweeping every corner, obliterating the darkness that had been my entire world for hours. And then my father was in the doorway, Sterling, the man who commanded boardrooms across 3 continents, the man I had never in my entire adult life seen rattled by anything. He was sprinting toward me with a face I did not recognize. Terror. Naked, unmasked, absolute terror. My mother threw herself over my frozen body, pulling me close, sobbing my name over and over into my hair. My father took my hand and gripped it so hard it should have hurt. He turned to the private medical team he had brought, elite paramedics from a premier service, dispatched the moment the call ended, and he roared, "Check her vitals right now. Push cardiac stimulants. Do whatever it takes to save my daughter's life." They wrapped me in thermal blankets, started an IV, rushed me out on a stretcher. The diagnosis came fast: acute shock from medication deprivation, severe hypothermia, organ stress. Immediate transport to the family's private hospital on the Upper East Side. Straight to the VIP intensive care unit. As they carried me through the living room, I saw my father standing still in the center of the penthouse, looking around at the dark, frozen, powerless space where his daughter had nearly died. The wrath in his eyes was unlike anything I had ever seen on a human face. He turned to his executive assistant and spoke in a voice of ice. "Leave a team here. Extract every second of security footage from the building servers. Every second. How dare they do something this evil to my daughter? I will show them what it means to beg for death." 1 week later, I woke up in a private hospital suite, flooded with warm morning sunlight. My heart was beating steadily. My lungs were clear. The specialist said my recovery was remarkable, almost miraculous given what my body had been through. I was alive, and I was absolutely, completely, icily furious. My father came in on day 8 carrying an iPad. He set it in my lap without a word and simply let me see for myself. Genevieve. Standing under the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Fur coat. Chanel bag worth tens of thousands of dollars. Caption glowing with arrogance. "Life is short. Enjoy the luxuries your big brother provides. Clarice." Facebook Live from a Michelin-starred restaurant in Rome, bragging to distant relatives about her Amalfi Coast resort. When a cousin asked about her sick daughter-in-law back home, she typed, publicly, for the world to see, that life and death were in God's hands, that the family had done everything they could, and that they would return eventually to organize the funeral. Which would, she added, be proof of their great devotion, and Thaddeus. In 74 days, he had charged over $250,000 to corporate cards linked directly to my accounts. Rolexes in Milan, diamond jewelry, luxury hotel suites, convertible sports cars on the coastal highways. He spent with the total freedom of a man who had already inherited everything, because in his mind, he had. My father let the silence sit. Then say the word, and I freeze every card they have. Right now, they'll be stranded on the pavement in Rome with nothing. I shook my head slowly. No, Dad. Let them spend. Let them fly as high as they possibly can. I looked out the hospital window at the gray Manhattan skyline. Cold. Beautiful. Mine. I want them to enjoy every single one of those 74 days. I want them to come home fat and happy, and completely convinced that they've won. I want them to walk through that door. I turned to face him, and step straight into their worst nightmare. My father smiled, slow, sharp, deeply satisfied. He reached over and stroked my hair the way he used to when I was a child. He said I was truly his daughter. The next 74 days belonged to me. While they posted vacation selfies and swiped my credit cards at luxury boutiques, I was doing 2 things simultaneously. Healing my body and building their destruction. By day 30, I was walking through the hospital's private gardens on my own. By day 50, I was spending 8 hours a day reviewing legal documents. By day 60, I was sharp, focused, and completely recovered in spirit even before my body caught up. And by day 70, the chief of medicine sat across from me, reviewed every lab result, and declared me 100% recovered. Optimal vitals, disease fully suppressed. I asked to be discharged. But before I left that hospital, Attorney Vance and I had already built an airtight legal cage around everything Thaddeus thought he owned. Vance was the holding company's lead counsel, 20 years of cutthroat corporate litigation. The kind of lawyer that opposing counsel loses sleep over. He came to the clinic personally every single afternoon. We went through every document, every deed, every contract with surgical precision. The findings were almost poetic. The penthouse in Tribeca, purchased before the marriage, using funds from my personal trust fund. The deed was solely in my name. Thaddeus had zero legal claim to a single square foot of it. Not the floors, not the walls, not the air inside. The trading company, founded entirely with my capital. Thaddeus held the CEO title under a notarized power of attorney I had voluntarily granted him. A revocable power of attorney. I owned 95% of the LLC. He was legally a W-2 employee. I could terminate him at any moment. Unilaterally, without his knowledge, without warning, without his consent. The credit cards, authorized user cards, every single one of them, tied directly to my primary corporate account. Everything he had spent years treating as his own, he had been borrowing. Every dollar, every square foot, every title. All of it on temporary loan from a woman he had left to die. We drafted everything in total secrecy. The board resolution terminating Thaddeus as CEO, effective immediately upon execution. The revocation of all proxy powers and authorized signatories. The court order to freeze every joint account and cancel every supplementary card. All of it sitting ready. Loaded. Waiting for my signal. Not yet. Not until day 74. On day 70, I returned to the penthouse. My father's team had been through every inch of it. The place had been professionally deep cleaned, damaged furniture replaced, every trace of that horrible night erased. Except on the bookshelf, where the hidden nanny cam had been recording in perfect 4K since before Thaddeus and his family had ever left. I stood in the master bedroom for a moment, looked at the vanity where the vials had been, looked at the trash can in the corner, then I walked to the wardrobe and chose a crimson silk dress, red lipstick, cashmere shawl. I sat at the vanity and applied my makeup with a steady hand, and the woman looking back at me in the mirror was not the hollow, trembling shadow from 70 days ago. She was something else entirely. I walked into the living room and settled onto the velvet sofa with a cup of artisan tea. 4 of my father's security contractors, Garrison and his team, former special forces, built like architecture, took their positions at the 4 corners of the room in tailored black suits. The trap was set. The stage was dressed. The players were in position. All that was missing was for the greedy, oblivious prey to come strolling through the door. I heard them before I saw them, luggage wheels clicking down the corridor. Voices loud with the particular obnoxiousness of people who've spent 10 weeks being indulged. Clarice was instructing Thaddeus to be careful with her new limited edition Birkin. Even a scratch would be devastating. Then, in the same casual breath, she mentioned that once they got settled, they should look up a good funeral home, because Serafina's body was surely already decomposing, and they'd need a professional biohazard crew, so the apartment wouldn't stink up the building. Genevieve enthusiastically agreed, reminding her brother that after the funeral, he needed to call his lawyer immediately to transfer the penthouse and the company into his name. She'd already been browsing Porsches online. She wanted him to buy it the second the estate was settled. Thaddeus laughed, the deep, satisfied laugh of a man who believes he's already won, and told them to relax. Said the paperwork was ready, said the money and the penthouse were practically already theirs. He just warned them to mentally prepare for the smell when he opened the door. Then came the electronic beep of the smart lock keypad. Thaddeus punching in his code Earl. He muttered in annoyance. Tried again. Same error. Beep. Clarice started whining, telling him to focus. He'd probably hit the wrong button. He tried a third time. Garrison walked calmly to the front door, disengaged the interior deadbolt, and swung it wide open. The hallway light poured into the apartment. 3 faces, jet-lagged, luggage-laden, mid-conversation, completely unprepared, stared into what they expected to be a dark, ruined, possibly crime-scene apartment. What they saw instead was warm light. The scent of cedar and cinnamon, an immaculate living room, and me, sitting perfectly still on the velvet sofa in a crimson silk dress, teacup in hand, 4 enormous men in black standing around the room like pillars. The transformation on their faces happened in a fraction of a second, and it was, I will be honest with you, everything I had spent 74 days working toward. Thaddeus's smug grin didn't fade. It collapsed, fell off his face like it had never been attached. His eyes went wide enough that I thought they might actually leave his head. His mouth opened around a word he could not form. Clarice's Birkin bag slipped from her fingers and hit the marble floor with a dull, expensive thud. Genevieve stumbled backward over a suitcase, nearly going completely down. I set my teacup down on the glass coffee table, slowly, deliberately, and I smiled. "How was your European vacation?" I said pleasantly. "You're back earlier than I expected. Why are you standing there like statues?" "Come in." The door is open. Not one of them could produce a single word. Clarice recovered first. She always did. That domineering, entitled instinct of hers was stronger than shock. She stomped inside, pointed a finger directly at my face, and started shrieking. How dare I change the code to her house? Who were these men? Was I having an affair while my husband was away, dragging the family's good name through the mud? Shameless woman. Thaddeus stepped in right behind her, instantly finding the script, playing the outraged, betrayed husband with everything he had, demanding explanations, declaring his house had rules, warning me that being sick didn't give me the right to do whatever I pleased. Genevieve lurked behind both of them, sneering that I had probably faked the whole illness just to throw parties in their absence. The silk dress and the makeup, clearly the behavior of a woman without morals. I let them finish, every word, every accusation, every performance. I let it all land and dissipate in the air like smoke. Then I stood up, smoothed my dress, walked to the mahogany console table, and picked up the thick bound folder I had placed there specifically for this moment. I carried it across the room and stopped in front of Thaddeus. Then I threw it directly into his chest, hard enough that the binder burst open, pages scattering and fluttering down across the floor. Credit card statements, itemized, time-stamped, every transaction laid out in black and white at their feet. I didn't need to look at the papers. I had memorized every single line. "On the 15th of last month," I said, my voice clear and carrying, "Thaddeus spent $2,500 on a Rolex watch in Milan. That same morning, I was receiving defibrillator shocks for cardiac failure in the emergency room." I paused. Let that image settle into the room. On the 22nd, Genevieve charged $15,000 in Chanel bags in Paris. That same afternoon, the medical team was injecting a $300 emergency compound directly into my bloodstream to prevent my organs from shutting down. I walked slowly, deliberately, along the line of their frozen faces. On the 5th of this month, Clarice spent $4,000 on a Michelin-starred dinner and luxury cosmetics on the Amalfi Coast. That same day, I was in physical therapy relearning how to walk because my leg muscles had atrophied from weeks of being unable to leave a bed. My voice rose, filling the penthouse from floor to ceiling. In 74 days, your family burned through over $250,000. Every cent charged to supplementary corporate cards tied directly to my personal business accounts. You took my money, spent my life's work, flew to Europe to celebrate, and left me in this apartment after throwing my life-saving medication in the trash. cutting the power, and shutting off the water. A deliberate, calculated attempt to end my life. Did you genuinely believe that after my death, no one would ever find out? The room was absolutely silent. Clarice was shaking. She opened her mouth and tried to say the pills fell in the trash by accident, that the power went out due to a grid failure, that none of this was what it looked like. Thaddeus's face had gone the color of old ash. He saw the walls closing in. He tried the only other move he had left, softening his voice, performing contrition, suggesting that as husband and wife, we could resolve this amicably, privately, between ourselves. I laughed. It was not a polite laugh. It rang through the penthouse, sharp and merciless and completely genuine. Amicably. I let the words sit there. You don't have the right to even suggest that to me. Every single thing you did that night was captured in full 4K by a hidden camera in the bookshelf. Every vial you threw away, every breaker you flipped, every valve you turned. The moment you walked out that door and locked it from the outside. All of it. On record. Irrefutable. I looked at him for a long, steady moment. My patience and my love for this family died in that dark room. The person standing in front of you now is strictly the rightful owner of the empire you tried to steal. I turned to Garrison. Get them out of my home. What followed took less than a minute. 4 professional, utterly unamused security contractors moved in from 3 sides simultaneously. Garrison locked an iron grip on Thaddeus's shoulder, the kind of grip that made it immediately clear that resistance was not a real option. The other 3 took Clarice and Genevieve. The screaming was genuinely spectacular. Clarice thrashed and shrieked that she was the mother-in-law, that she had a right to live in this penthouse, cursing me to the heavens. Thaddeus roared that I had lost my mind, that a wife couldn't throw her own husband out of their shared home. Genevieve simply screamed. You're mistaken, I said, perfectly calm over the noise. This penthouse is in my name alone, purchased before our marriage with my private trust fund. You have no legal claim to a single square inch of it. Not one. The guards dragged all 3 toward the exit, their resistance entirely useless against trained professionals. Then the 4th man grabbed every piece of designer luggage they had just rolled in and hurled it out the door, one piece at a time. The heavy bags crashed against the hallway walls with deeply satisfying thuds. Genevieve scrambled across the marble floor, trying to catch her handbag. I walked to the threshold and looked down at the 3 of them, disheveled, pale, crumpled against the corridor walls in their expensive wrinkled clothes. And I delivered the last words I intended to say to them in this building. This address is permanently off limits to all 3 of you. If you return and cause a scene, I will have the NYPD arrest you for criminal trespass. Prepare yourselves for everything that comes next. I stepped back inside. The heavy oak door closed with a boom that echoed through the building. I pulled out my phone, opened the smart home app, and changed the passcode to a 12-digit randomized sequence. Then I went back to the sofa and finished my tea. The next morning, I moved on 2 fronts at exactly the same time. First stop, the bank. As a high-net-worth VIP client, I was received in a private suite. I placed my identification and legal documents on the desk and issued my instructions without preamble. Freeze all joint accounts. Cancel every supplementary card bearing the names Thaddeus, Clarice, and Genevieve. Permanently, effective immediately. Wire all term deposits into a new offshore account to which only I held access. The bank executives moved at speed. Within 15 minutes, every confirmation alert had arrived on my phone. The river of cash that had sustained their lifestyle for years was officially dammed. From that second forward, they could not extract a single dollar from anything connected to my name. Second stop. Corporate headquarters. My company's glass skyscraper rose in Midtown Manhattan, and I walked through its lobby the way I should have been walking through it for years. Not as a quiet administrative presence, but as the majority shareholder and ultimate authority. I went straight to the executive boardroom. Emergency board meeting. VP of HR and CFO in attendance. I presented the legal filings, the ownership documentation, the proxy revocation, and the board resolution terminating Thaddeus as CEO. All previously filed with the Secretary of State's by Attorney Vance. Around 10 o'clock, Thaddeus arrived in the lobby, Milan suit. Custom fit. The swagger of a man who had spent 10 weeks being treated like royalty and saw no reason today would be different. Two corporate security guards stepped in front of the turnstile. Thaddeus glared and told them to move. He was the CEO of this company. The VP of Human Resources walked out carrying a small cardboard box containing the personal items cleared from Thaddeus's desk. In his other hand, a formal termination letter. He pressed the box into Thaddeus's chest and informed him, with the flat affect of someone delivering a completely routine communication, that, pursuant to a resolution by the board and the majority shareholder, he was terminated with cause as of this morning. He was to take his belongings and vacate the property immediately. At that exact moment, Thaddeus's phone rang. Genevieve. Her voice coming through the speaker, audible even from several feet away. Pure panic, barely intelligible between sobs. She was at a luxury cafe in Soho with her sorority sisters, and the card had been declined. She'd tried another one at a boutique, also declined. She was publicly humiliated in front of everyone and begging him to check the bank accounts right now. Thaddeus opened his banking app, bright red. Account frozen by primary account holder. All transactions blocked. The cardboard box slipped from his hands and hit the marble floor. Pens and desk accessories scattered across the polished surface. The arrogance drained out of him in real time, like watching a building lose power floor by floor. In less than 24 hours, the people who had left a bedridden woman to die in the dark had gone from spending freely on the Amalfi Coast to having roughly $70 in loose change between three people in one of the most expensive cities on Earth. Desperate people do desperate things. The next morning, Thaddeus brought the whole family down to my corporate lobby and staged a public performance. Clarice had deliberately smeared her mascara and roughed up her hair to maximize the visual impact of victimhood. She positioned herself in the center of the polished marble entrance hall and screamed, loudly, theatrically, for maximum audience, that her evil daughter-in-law had stolen their family fortune and thrown an elderly woman and her devoted son onto the freezing streets, after they had lovingly cared for her through her terrible illness. Thaddeus played the betrayed, bewildered husband. Genevieve played the ruined young girl whose future had been callously destroyed. People were recording within minutes. Building security had to form a barricade. I watched all of it from my executive suite on CCTV, drinking a matcha latte. I did not go downstairs. I did not argue. I did not give them the reaction they were performing for. Instead, I gave a quiet signal to my PR team. They executed a single post simultaneously across every major platform: X, TikTok, Instagram. No insults. No emotional appeals. Just evidence, presented with total clarity. Video 1. Thaddeus, in crisp 4K, sweeping my life-saving medication into the trash, flipping the breaker switches in the electrical panel, shutting the main water valve, walking out and locking the door. Video 2. A supercut cut of their vacation photos and videos pulled directly from their own public accounts, time-stamped, set side by side against the credit card statements from the identical dates. Genevieve's Chanel bags appearing on screen next to the cost of the emergency injection that kept my organs functional that same afternoon. Video 3. A live feed of the performance currently happening in my lobby, in real time, right at this moment. Within 2 hours, the post had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. Comments flooded in from every corner of the internet. Raw, visceral outrage at the reality of a husband who had tried to slowly murder his sick wife for an inheritance. The victim masks they were wearing in that lobby were stripped off in public, in real time. While they were still wearing them, the NYPD arrived, dispersed the crowd, threatened arrest. Thaddeus, Clarice, and Genevieve stumbled out through the lobby and onto the Manhattan sidewalk, where pedestrians were watching the viral video on their phones as they walked past. There are moments when the universe arranges things with a dark, perfect sense of irony. That was one of them. The collapse of their lives after that was swift and without mercy. Thaddeus was blacklisted from every employer whose HR department had access to the internet, which was all of them. His face on the news made him unemployable overnight. When he showed up to interview for warehouse work, the manager recognized him and physically chased him from the building. Genevieve's university expelled her for ethics violations compounded by delinquent tuition. The sorority sisters, who had once fought to be photographed beside her designer bags, now treated her like a contagion. Her academic future, her social world, her entire carefully constructed identity, gone. Clarice went to a Queens farmer's market trying to find discounted bruised produce. A vendor recognized her from the TikToks, dumped dirty mop water on her shoes, and screamed for the entire market to hear that he wouldn't sell a single vegetable to a woman who had helped her son try to murder his wife for money. Other vendors joined in. She fled. The motel they'd checked into threw them out on day 2. Internet vigilantes had been calling the front desk all morning, frightening other guests. The owner threw their deposit at them in the parking lot and told them to consider it charity. That night, they dragged their scuffed designer luggage through the New York cold and ended up under the concrete overpass of the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. Huddled in a filthy corner beside a chain-link fence, using each other's bodies for warmth, wearing the remnants of 10 weeks of European luxury in a place where luxury meant absolutely nothing. Clarice wept. Thaddeus stared into the dark, with hollow, dead eyes. Genevieve curled against her mother in the dirt. The Chanel bags sat on the concrete beside them. Completely worthless. I had lain in darkness and cold, and wondered if I would survive the night. Now they understood, in the most literal bone-deep way possible, exactly what that felt like. The criminal trial was the final act. I walked into New York State Supreme Court wearing a razor-sharp black blazer, my hair perfectly set, my posture serene, and completely unreadable. Attorney Vance led a battalion of the sharpest litigators in the city behind me. In the gallery, the seats were full. Across the courtroom, Thaddeus sat at the defense table in an orange jail jumpsuit, emaciated, gray-skinned, barely resembling the man who had leaned over my bed and whispered his plans for my inheritance into my ear. Clarice and Genevieve sat in the gallery and stared at the floor. The prosecution laid the case out with lethal, methodical precision. Every asset traced to its origin. Every deed, every trust document, every wire transfer, the entire empire mapped back to my name, my capital, my family's money. Thaddeus had contributed nothing. He had simply occupied the space I had created for him and called it his own. Then the court monitors lit up. The 4K footage played in total silence. The gallery watched Thaddeus sweep the medication vials into the trash, flip the breakers, shut the water valve, walk out, lock the door. A collective intake of breath. And then the heaviest silence I have ever heard in a room full of people. The prosecution submitted my demand for $500,000 in restitution for extreme physical and psychological trauma. Thaddeus tried. He looked at the judge with a cracking, desperate voice, and said the medicine had fallen in the trash by accident. He asked the court to award him just a small fraction of the marital assets. Anything. Because he had nothing left and nowhere to go. The judge adjusted his robes, leaned forward over the bench, and cut him off. He told Thaddeus to stop insulting the intelligence of the court. He stated that the footage was irrefutable evidence of malice aforethought. He noted that Thaddeus's current destitution was the direct and entirely earned consequence of his own actions. Then he handed down the sentence, 8 years in a state correctional facility for attempted murder. $500,000 in restitution to the victim. The gavel cracked through the courtroom like a gunshot. Thaddeus collapsed to his knees. Clarice and Genevieve wept in the gallery. And somewhere in the back of my mind, the sound of a hollow plastic vial hitting a trash can, finally, permanently, went quiet. On the courthouse steps, as two NYPD officers guided a handcuffed Thaddeus toward the transport van, Clarice and Genevieve broke through the press line and threw themselves at me. They grabbed the hem of my coat, dropped to their knees on the cold stone. Clarice wept with her whole body, confessing that sleeping under a highway overpass had done what no amount of wealth or comfort ever could. It had opened her eyes, that the money had blinded her completely, that she knew now, in a way she could never unknow, how monstrous what they had done was. She begged for mercy. Genevieve grabbed my ankle and cried that she had nothing left. No friends, no university, no future she could see, and that she knew she didn't deserve forgiveness. But she was asking for it anyway, because she had nowhere else to turn. Thaddeus stopped beside the van, in handcuffs. And he looked at me and broke down entirely. Not performing, not calculating, just broken. He said he knew his crime was unforgivable. He wasn't asking me to take him back. He knew he was garbage and that I deserved better than he had ever given me. He asked for one thing only, not for himself, just enough for bus tickets. For his mother and sister to get out of New York City. He swore on whatever remained of his soul that he would work prison jobs and pay every cent of the restitution. I stood completely still and looked at each of them. I believed, genuinely believed, that the suffering was real, that the freezing nights under that overpass had cracked something open that years of comfort and wealth and willful cruelty had kept sealed shut, that for the first time in their lives, they were seeing themselves with absolute clarity. It didn't change what I was going to say. Forgiveness is not a pardon. It is not a restoration. It is not throwing a life preserver to the people who held your head underwater. Forgiveness is releasing the poison from your own heart, so it doesn't keep killing you from the inside out. It is not their redemption. It is your freedom. I had already forgiven them. Weeks ago, in the quiet of my own recovery, I had let the hatred go, not for their sake, but for mine. Because I refused to carry it, but release is not rescue. I looked at them for the last time. The man who had been my husband, the woman who had been my mother-in-law, the girl who had shared our home. My voice was quiet, clear, final. I accept your apologies. Between us, it is completely over. There are no debts left for me to collect, and none for you to repay to me. The road you are walking now was built by your own hands, brick by brick, choice by choice. Walk it, face what it holds, and do not ever try to appear in my life again. I turned, stepped into the back of the armored SUV. The heavy door closed behind me. I did not look back through the window. I did not need to. I told my driver, in a completely light and ordinary voice, to take us home. My parents were waiting with lunch. The vehicle pulled smoothly into the winter sunlight of a Manhattan afternoon. Behind me, 3 people knelt on cold asphalt and wept into the sound of the city. Ahead of me, open sky. My parents' table, a life that was quiet and warm and completely, entirely mine. Maybe you're watching this and thinking about the freezing darkness of that penthouse bedroom. Maybe you're thinking about 3 people huddled under a highway overpass in the clothes they bought with someone else's blood and sweat. Good. Sit with both of those images. They both matter. Because this story isn't really about revenge. Even though the revenge was immaculate, it's about what happens when you hand someone your entire world to hold, and they treat it like it was always theirs. It's about what it costs a woman to disappear into someone else's ego and call it love. And it's about what it looks like when she decides, in the dark, in the cold, with nothing but a burner phone and a father's phone number, to survive anyway. The greatest lesson this story teaches is not that karma is real, though it absolutely is, and it absolutely arrived on schedule. The greatest lesson is this: your independence is not a luxury. It is not something you set aside to make someone else comfortable. It is not negotiable. And it is not something you trade for the illusion of being loved. It is the only fortress that cannot be taken from you. No designer bag, no stolen title, no empire built on someone else's foundation will ever cover a rotten soul. Not from the outside world, not from yourself. And no matter how dark the room gets, how cold, how silent, how completely sealed off from everything you thought was safe, the fire doesn't go out, it waits, and when the door finally opens, it burns everything down.